That said, I'm going to bring up our Earth Mother, who happens to be the poet laureate of Newburgh, and an incredible sage, as I have jousted with her many times, in true love. Of all the cathedrals around this planet where people needed to find sanctuary, she has led us in. Mona Toscano.
I have been working on this piece for 32 years. Can you imagine?
You're not that old.
No, I know. From the time I babbled. I have put it away saying, oh, it's no good, what am I doing this for? And then when I do that, I'm reminded of W.S. Merwin. I think he is the greatest poem of the last century. And I can't believe he didn't win a Nobel Prize. He won some 50 poetry prizes, 2 Pulitzers, but he didn't win a Nobel, and his work is so noble. Anyway, he studied with Berryman at Princeton, and he asked Berryman, how do you know if a poem is good? And Berryman said to him, you never know. You never know. You die not knowing. If you have to ask, don't write.
Touche.
So that's why I put this away so many times, but let's see what we have. Anna, shot 1. Grandmother screamed for her morphine at 2 in the afternoon. Oh, grandmother, do you have no fear? It's almost 4 and you'll have tea and morphine too. Background, I remember my grandmother in the hospital in much pain. She didn't seem, she didn't sound, she didn't look like her beautiful self. She was celery white from wreathing and crying. My grandmother, age 46, had just had a double mastectomy. To free my grandmother Anne from her pain, lobotomy would be the only solution, the doctor said. The man who invented lobotomy would in time be given a Nobel Prize. I didn't understand what was happening. I was 6. I remember my parents sitting around the kitchen table in straight back chairs, stiff as fennel. The silence was like church. The enameled metal boudoir table emanated icebox cold. My mother, eyes brimming with tears, was all of 25. Her mouth fumbled as if trying to find how to pull words out. Finally, at first hauntingly, then outright steel bold, my mother said, I don't want her to turn into a vegetable. I knew the way my mother spoke with her scold voice that a claim was no joke. Would my grandmother turn into a round green head of crunchy lettuce? Or worse yet, be a frizzly bunch of hoary yellow chicory? Was this grown-up make-believe, an evil eye, wicked witch curse? I wondered how long the transformation would take. It was my father and my mother's stepfather who rescued Anna from the somber white-walled, long-tunneled halls of the inhospitable hospital. It was an hour away from the North Bergen, New Jersey home my parents had brought onto the GI Bill 1946, 2 years before Anna's calamity. No longer would she be living in her Italian satin and silk decorated Mohawk wool carpeted apartment in Jersey City. My mother said Anna would come to our house to be comfortable as she was dying. But then as a child, I didn't know what death was. In time, I found out. I remember staring observant from the kitchen as the men of the family were bringing Anna stretchered, cautiously bringing her up the back door stoop of the house, passing the kitchen with its new sanitish, sun-yellow, freckled with juicy red strawberries, new for Grandma's hospital rescue. The kitchen on Gare's Place, the kitchen where I reached from childhood to the age of reason. My mother's pronouncement confirmed her decision to take her mother home. Her filial devotion became a ritual of full-time loving care that included administering morphine injections. The needles became bigger and bigger, like in a horror movie. The contained dosage continued to increase to the point of barely being effective. And because my grandmother had had so many shots on arms, legs, and buttocks, it became harder and harder for my mother to find an injectable place on grandmother's riven body. My mother would cry out to tell Grandma to be still. She said the same thing when she twirled my hair into curls for schools, only now she gritted her teeth addressing Grandma. When I lived with Grandma between the ages of 2 and 4, she had been strong, statuesque, Zoptic, my very own Anna. She was too young to be called Grandma, she said, so I called her by her given name. A spun gold blonde with soft velvet brown eyes, she could roll round in Italian fascias like bow-lipped actresses did in talkless movies. She too could control her tongue, her temper, not like a crazy Italian, but an upright American, like honey warmed to bubbling, almost to the point of boil. The first child born in America to my mental great-grandparents, Anna navigated better than Columbus between 2 worlds, the old and the new. How the butcher loved her style of flirting to bargain. She was the first woman in the family of 9 girls to wear slacks, and she looked like Marlene Dietrich posing. Story had it that when she was young, she could be tough. When Anna was expelled from the 7th grade, my great-grandmother went to see the teacher. Nona politely addressed Miss Rover and said, "I'm very sorry that Anne," she used Anna's American name, "slapped you in the face. I hope she didn't hurt you. But don't you know you weren't right to call her a dirty guinea? She was born in America." Death care. The guest bedroom became grandmother's bedroom. In effect, it became the death room. There Anna disintegrated before our very eyes. She became a morphine addict, confused, distended. Her beautiful, healthy, wavy golden hair became scrawny straw around her skeletal face. My mother would bring Anna into the kitchen, morning sunny, for sponge bathing. On seeing her scar-slashed chest exposed like a flat flesh slab, I marveled at how strong she must have been to have undergone the slicing, cutting, sawing away operation. Once I stared too long, and she told my mother that I shouldn't have to see her being washed. Henceforth, I had to go outside or amuse myself in my own room. What was the most difficult part of the ordeal for me was I had to be quiet. My feelings were hurt when grandmother spoke her washing dictum to my mother. Anna had always loved my presence. I could always make her laugh by singing or just smiling at her. She would speak to me in Italian and tell me how adorable I was, and I would beam all the more for her. Her bathing embarrassment made me know that not only physically but mentally Anna was a different person. Death was not only the disfigurement of the body, it was also the snuffing of her ego. I realize now that while her breast destroyed her femininity and smothered her gregarious spirit, I wondered if the doctors had not performed the double mastectomy, if the professionals had just let death take its toll, if she would have screamed less and gone more resigned to her death. I suppose she was a guinea pig. From what I understand today, breast cancer is laser treated and not corporal disfigurating. Her ending, or decomposition of spirit onto death, took about 2 years. To a child, a very, very long time. A spell of agony and spiraling despair. Death crept in like a hatch-patterned adder, whip slithering away in the basement, like a scampering, fat, black, freckled, hairy gray rat that nibbled wire and left pebble drippings in the attic. When I heard someone say, "I can see death is there," from the furtive glances I saw of Anna, of her shrinking debilitation, I gathered that death was in her bedroom, creeping in, but death was yet to catch up. My mother kept her sorrow to herself. She knew if she had asked the priest why, he would have said, don't ask, accept. Just as birth is awesome, a cancer pain death too is filled with a stunning awe that is stupefying in its awfulness. The spirit of being slowly ebbs away with moans and murmurs. Life deflates with less and less breath, with long stretches of sobbed inhalation, held with exhalation that is barely there in a gaping, hollow mouth. The body stunned remains, but consciousness is fleeting. What was awareness becomes more and more stark stupor. Sleep takes over. Sleep appears to be death till the eyes jerk open. The cycle repeats, then finally comes the setting in of cold, sorrowful, blue-gray, crass lifelessness. I'm going to save the rest for another time.
Keep reading.
Because it's such a long piece.
Finish it.
Oh, la
Now I
la.
have to edit.
All right. Aunt Addie was there when it happened. The sisters, coming mainly from the Bronx, used to take turns traveling to sit with Anna by her bedside, whether she was awake or not. For more than a few months at the very end, I wasn't allowed in her bedroom. It became the solemn death room, a room for adults to administer to death. Not only was it I who was quiet, but the adults too now whispered even in the kitchen. It seemed grown-ups thought that as a child wasn't allowed in a birthing room, neither was it allowed in as someone was dying, as if death were actually a thief that would come and snatch the child away. When it was all over, Aunt Addie told me she didn't have silver dollars, so she put a quarter on each of Anna's eyes. I thought this too was some kind of inexplicable symbolism, that the money was some sort of token or medal for the dead. I didn't comprehend that the dead stare at death. It did seem at the closing of the end as if Grandma had become vegetative. She was like a wilted, flabby stalk of celery, almost transparent. Then she became nearly ash-white, like a dead flower that had been put into the flame of a fireplace, but that did not smoke but became ash. I could imagine that ashen flower become a pile, a sliver of streak of crumbled cinder. If a wind came by, it would have carried the cinders up and out of that chimney onto the street. Then if someone happened to be coming by, a speck of that cinder would have gone into his eye, and that speck would smart. That is, his eye would smart, and maybe his eye would tear like he was crying. He wouldn't know what hit him, a scintilla of a passing light. At the end, it seemed, the end of life could cause a smarting. Seeing someone unto death could be a kind of smarting, on knowing that what was is now all over, and emanating from the body, from the core, and emanating from the body, from the corpse is silence, a silence of being that once was a being, and the loss of that being is like a void, an emptiness. Bystanders can sense that emptiness, that void, but they can't explain it. They are like a child confronted with an inexplicable something that cannot be described. The end is an awesome and awful experience, and if we, the living, can connect with the emptiness, with the state of non-being, we can comprehend and know that the emptiness exists in its own realm of silence, a quietude, and that silence is a stillness that is peace. To someone who has suffered at the end of life, It must be so much more welcoming than ever imagined to be without a body, to no longer have flesh and pain, to be in that realm of silence, the enlightenment, an engulfment of serenity or release from suffering. Yes, even as a child, I could sense that my grandmother Anna had passed to a new realm. She had come to be in a place that was distinct as the quiet of snowflakes falling without sound, adding to the whiteness that is an illumination, a silence that is like the passage of the last sliver of dark night that comes to be obliterated in the rosy pale red glow of dawn. That rosy glow stretches across the horizon, a soundless signal of a new beginning. The break of day is, in that sense, the breakup of night, which comes from its own emotive of quiet, which comes in its own emotive of quiet. As a child, I remember the soundlessness of my grandmother's death as a sweetness of afterlife. I no longer heard my grandmother's cries in pain. So it seemed Anna had reached the threshold of a new beginning, a place where souls went after life, a place without body, bone, marrow, muscle, and flesh pain, an invisible place of soaring souls that I imagined as heaven. Heaven, grown-ups told me, was where my grandmother had gone. It was a secret, inexplicable place. I came to envision it as its own private sphere that is known only after spirit is snuffed out of life, a place where the soul, released from body, comes to be re-spirited in the stupendous realm of angels, spirits, God, peace, release, and indescribable, ever high-tiding happiness. I further knew my Anna had reached that inexplicable realm when she came smiling to me in dreams. I knew my dreams were real, as Anne used to interpret her sisters and her own dreams at aunt gatherings. Her sisters always marveled at how she could know things, just knew them, past, present, future. And she would tell more of the future with cards, an ordinary deck of cards. She would have the person wanting the telling to shuffle the cards. Then Anna would lay the cards in a certain pattern, turning several at a time in stages of the telling. When I would ask her to read my cards, she would tell me to shuffle them. But I couldn't, at the age of 4, manage to shuffle. My hands were too small, and she would tell me she couldn't read my cards until I could shuffle the deck. In my dreams after her life, she would make me set the table for the pouring of milk tea or Ovaltine, as we did at tea time with Nabisco Unita biscuits. Just as comforting were those dream times as the tea kettle whistle blowing old times in her kitchen. And then once, just once, she let me know that she was her former mighty, beautiful, honey blonde, happy being when she came to me in a vision, details to be told in another telling. Or perhaps it will remain our secret, hers and mine. This with no regrets. How wonderful are happy shared times when they remain grandmother to grandchild private, tete-a-tete special secrets. There is a kindred connection between grandparents and grandchild. For me, that bond remained real. I can feel it even after Anna's death.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you. It's the first draft, so it needs touching.